Adam, as you're probably aware, the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., federal civil service employees, are paid a pretty good salary compared to those in the private sector. However, that's even less than the UN bureaucrats are getting on the average. And given our budget deficit, I wonder whether you've been functioning lately with anti-Israel, what you would do if you were elected to the Senate to fund, our contribution is much greater than that of any other nation, to either defund the UN or substantially reduce that contribution.
Great question. Great question, and let me just share this before I answer, because there was one little inside comment that I wanted to make, because I felt so at home here in Boca Raton that I forgot to maybe share with the rest of the group that doesn't know this about me. But I talked about how important it is to have someone in Washington who's willing to go against the grain. And I forgot to tell you guys, I've been going against the grain my entire life. Many of you know this, but I'm the son of two liberal Jewish Democrats who was born in Brooklyn, New York. So I can tell you that hasn't always been easy. Having said that, let me address the serious question about the United Nations. The United Nations is a corrupt organization, plain and simple. The attempts, or what I would say, the threats to America's sovereignty come from the United Nations, and they also come from those who I believe are part of that same international movement. People like George Soros. I can tell you all this. I have a much different vision for the 21st century, and it doesn't include George Soros. Now, what we've seen, and I was the first person, I believe, I'll just say it this way, I came out very strongly when Hamas and Fatah created a unity government. I was one of the early advocates for eliminating all U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority. And I think that until we have a new president in the White House who understands moral clarity, that we will not have that type of policy. I do hope that the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate will continue to fight to eliminate that funding. Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Layton has a great piece of legislation that I think is a great first step in this process, because it also goes to the heart of your question, which is to defund any UN program that does not serve America's national security interests.
Thank you.
And I think we need to begin that right away.
Hi, Alan. I think one of the major cancers of this country that I come to find out every day that more and more people don't realize that the Federal Reserve System is a private corporation, tax-free, that prints money out of thin air. A lot of people didn't know that. Of course, I didn't know it not too long ago either. And if you Google Woodrow Wilson's last words before he died, there's a little controversy on it, but I kind of believe that he said in his last breath, "When I signed the Federal Reserve into power, I committed treason to my country." Where do you stand on the abolishment of the Federal Reserve and the IRS? And a flat tax.
Right.
I invited this guy. This is Jerry, this is my friend. I knew it was going to be a tough question.
It's a great question, because first let me just admit that I don't have a PhD in economics.
Neither does Obama.
But what I will tell you is that monetary policy is as important of a component to our nation's fiscal health as fiscal policy is. And what we have seen with the continued printing of money, whether it's QE1, QE2, potentially QE3, what you're seeing is a continued devaluation of America's dollars. There is no more insidious tax than the devaluation of the currency, or inflation for that matter. Now, I do not support at this time the abolishment of the Federal Reserve. What I do support is full and total transparency of the Federal Reserve, and more importantly, as I continue to learn more about this issue, I believe that we do need to move back in the direction toward putting America back on the gold standard. Now, to your other point from monetary policy to fiscal policy, I think I mentioned it briefly. I believe first and foremost what we need to do is have an overhaul of our tax system. We cannot create jobs in this country if we have a 35% corporate tax rate that is making us non-competitive around the globe. It's sending jobs overseas.
That's right.
And more importantly, what it's doing is it's allowing companies to continue to park assets overseas. We need to have...
We have trillions of dollars overseas with all of our big corporations just sitting there. But they're not going to come here with these tax rates. The IRS needs to be eliminated and out flat tax. It's fair for everybody.
And that's and I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why I said earlier, we need to have a tax system that's flatter, fairer, and simpler. And that begins with, I believe, several things. Reducing all of our tax rates to flat levels, whether it's one level or two levels ultimately. Eliminating loopholes, exemptions, and corporate favoritism.
All deductions.
And more importantly, eliminating the death tax. Eliminating taxes on capital gains, eliminating taxes on dividends. These are the things that we need to do to create investment, to create jobs here in this country. And this is what I was talking about earlier, about having a plan that we've been talking about, that I think more Republicans need to be talking about for economic growth in our country, because we can't just be the party of cutting. We need to be talking about what we're going to do to create jobs.
Hi, Adam. What are you going to do about publicizing Agenda 21?
Sorry, I went too quick. Sorry, I know you wanted to answer. I wanted to get to the question so fast. I think I've mentioned several times. First and foremost, I talked about George Soros. I think George Soros is probably one of the greatest threats in terms of his involvement and his role that he plays with all of these international bodies and all of these international organizations. As a member of the United States Senate, I will never do anything that in any way, shape, or form jeopardizes America's sovereignty. And I can tell you this right now, what is making America weaker on the global stage is our debt, is our fiscal health. And what is happening every single day, and we're seeing it more and more, as we continue to borrow money from countries like China that don't share our values and our interests, our ability to act in our own best interests are limited. And we're seeing it both from an economic perspective, we're seeing it both from a regulatory perspective, and we're seeing it also from a security perspective. And so I think it is critical for us to stand firm for American sovereignty and not support the types of things that are antithetical to and are not aligned with the constitutional principles of the U.S. Constitution. I think that is extremely important for us to understand. We understand that so much of this has already crept into our society. We need to put an end to it, and we need to make sure that we don't do anything that puts international bodies ahead of American law in any way.
We have time for a couple more here.
Hi, you mentioned George Soros a few times. He's a very powerful, wealthy person and a very evil person. How do you, first of all, attempt to neutralize him, get rid of him? He's the most powerful, right, he's the most powerful, evil person in this country. My first question, and my second question is, I know you can't support a candidate, really, but you talk about somebody who can stand up to all these things like you do. As a presidential candidate, of all those that we know at this time, can you suggest somebody that would do that? I don't know.
We'll make our own individual decision, that's for sure.
Let me say this about what I've learned in the past, I guess since April of 2009 with the Tea Party movement. And I say that word, or I use that phrase broadly, because I think it encaptures so many other organizations that are out there that are doing important things. I would tell you this. In 2010, this movement saved the Republican Party.
Yeah.
In 2012, this movement is the only thing that can potentially save our country. So when it comes to standing up against those types of forces that are, I believe, waging class warfare, that are undermining America's strength, America's security, I think we need to be more vocal. I think we need to spread the message. I think each and every one of you needs to be able to go out to your friends, to your neighbors, to your coworkers, and get them to an event like this. Get them to a meeting. Get them to start understanding what is happening to this country, and more importantly, especially if they have children and grandchildren, what type of future we're leaving for them if we don't do something in the next few years. And so I think it's not just about one person like George Soros. This is, as I talked about earlier, an ideological battle for the heart and soul of our country. And now is the time to fight.
That's right.
As for president, I'm going to let each and every one of you in this room decide who you want to support for the Republican nomination. But I think we all agree on one thing. Anyone but Obama.
Maybe a couple more here. Is that it? Thank you.
As a pro-life candidate, what do you feel that you can do as a member of Congress to change the current government's approach to abortion and changing Roe versus Wade?
Thank you so much for asking that question. And I think, let me just preface it by saying this. As a member of the United States Senate, I will not support any judges or judicial appointments that do not believe in a strict interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. And as a member of Congress, as a member of the Senate, as it relates to appropriations as well, I believe one of the areas where we can quickly begin to cut spending is by stopping funding for Planned Parenthood and any of those other organizations. I just think, I know, Alex, if I can just expand just real quickly. I know that an issue like abortion sometimes divides a group like this. And I hear a lot as I travel the state, people saying, stay away from social issues. Stay away from abortion. Stay away from marriage. We just have to agree on these issues. And these are very important issues. But as I said earlier, I think it is so important to understand that it has been the breakdown of our culture, the deterioration of our respect for life in this country, that's led to so many of the economic problems that we have. All of these issues are intertwined and inseparable. If you think about it, our economic prosperity, our national security, our traditional Judeo-Christian values, they're inseparable. So that's why I think it is so important for us to be able to have this conversation, to have this dialogue on all of these issues, and not just only focus on one. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
I think we have time for one more, and then Adam might be able to hang out afterwards to chat with some people for a few minutes. I know he wants to probably get home, but yes, sir.
That's right. He is home.
Adam, I certainly hope that you're going to be elected. As a practical matter, there's a rap on the Republican Party, it's a populist rap, is that they support the millionaires and billionaires because they don't want to raise their taxes. But my problem with that is Obama defines it as $200,000 a year. You tell someone from New York, New Jersey, California that they're millionaires and only $200,000 just without getting by. So why doesn't the Republican Party, to eliminate this just raise the taxes on true millionaires or like Buffett said, on extreme ultra-millionaires and billionaires. I don't see any problem with that. I think they have the extra money. They can spare it. Let's do it and eliminate that as a wrap.
Keep lowering.
This is the best part of the program, because this is when I get to disagree with somebody in the audience. But the reality is this: is that raising taxes, you could raise taxes 100% on all of the people that you alluded to, and you wouldn't even come close to addressing the fiscal challenges that we're facing. But here's how you eliminate the argument: you get on offense. And you stop being on defense like Republicans are always on. And you talk about the fact that this is class warfare that this administration and the Democrats in Congress are waging. And what we need to be able to do is go out and talk about why reducing taxes, why cutting spending are going to be the policies that create jobs.
That's right.
If we allow the Democrats to define the debate, we're going to lose. And I'll use this example. I talked about cut, cap, and balance briefly earlier. But if everybody remembers this, the minute the Republicans came out of the gate, we were using the language of the Democrats, agreeing to the fact that if we don't do something, America was going to default.
Right.
We used their language, and they backed us into a corner, and we were forced to accept a compromise. And I think it's the same thing on taxes. We cannot allow the Democrats to define the narrative. We need to be able to go out and talk about why tax cuts, a streamlined tax system, is what's best for economic growth in our country. And if we're on offense, we're not sitting back and listening to the class warfare rhetoric of tax millionaires and billionaires and eliminate subsidies for oil companies and for corporate jet owners and those types of things. That's what they want Republicans to do. They want us to break just a little bit, and just a little bit more, and then just a little bit more. And it goes back to what I said earlier, which is that this is not about splitting the difference. This is the time to fight. This is that line in the sand moment. And so that's why, as a candidate for United States Senate, I may say some things that are not going to be politically popular. Most of you know I'm not a politically correct candidate. But I'm going to say things that I truly believe are in the best interest of the future of this country. And it's like I said earlier, we can't be afraid about losing elections. We need to be concerned with the future of this country. That's why this is such an important time. That's why I'm spending 6-7 days a week traveling around the state, having the opportunity to meet with groups like this, to listen, to be able to have that conversation, and hopefully to be able to earn your support so that we can do the things that are necessary to put America back on the right track. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.